there will be a rug pull at the end of this video, so you can't blame me when you get surprised by it. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about all the different 5-star characters in the game, where they rank on a tier list, if you want to go by a tier list, and then I'm going to surprise all of you at the very end. But for now, we're going to just start off the list right here. I'm going to take a look at, we're going to go by roles. We're going to start with the healer role with Kaede. We're just going to very quickly say, oh, that's tier 1, 0.5. What does Kaede do? She heals, she cleanses ailments, she's awesome. Let's go into the breakers. So the breakers are a lot more interesting than the healers, because the healers is just Kaede and she's great. But as far as the breakers go, oh my god, look at that. Absolutely fantastic tiers right here. You kind of need to have a breaker in your team basically all the time, and as far as breakers go, you can't really do much better than Pluvia and Reyna. Pluvia gives you a crap ton of MP for the entire team, while also having AoE break and has ascension bonuses that give you even more bonuses to how fast you can break. Really good stuff, and it's going to be used in basically every single team that can fit her, because the MP regeneration is just that good. And then Reyna has the fastest break capacity in the entire game if you're talking about a single enemy. So if all you want is breaking, you can't get any faster than this. Iroha is not as fast as Reyna, and she's also a single target breaker, so why would you use her when you can use Reyna? Awesome. And then you have Lux, who exists, I guess. So then we have the attackers. So the attackers are in a really weird spot, where I'm going to put her right there, and then I'm going to put her right there, and I'm going to put everyone else right here. And you're going to be looking at this, and you're going to be thinking, what are you doing? What are you doing, Raz? There's no way this is the actual healer with attackers. What do you mean there's no attacker in S tier? And this is debatably maybe even here. Yeah, so attackers are in a really weird spot. I'm going to talk a lot more about this towards the end of the video, because that's where I already mentioned going to pull the rug out from under you. But right now, here's the thing about attackers that we're gonna just leave it at before we continue with the tier list. Attackers need a reason to actually exist and to be brought along in your team. What would that reason be? Well, to kill the boss. But does that mean that if you can kill the boss without an attacker, you don't need an attacker? Exactly. And what makes a specific attacker better than another attacker? Well, if they do more damage. But what if maybe there's something that might prevent us from actually killing the boss with any specific one attacker that we might have and we want to use, like Homura, for example? What would prevent us from killing a boss with Homura? There might be some really big problems we might run into, but once again, we're going to talk about that later, because I want to get the tier list stuff over before we get to the actually interesting part of this video. As far as the rest of the attackers go, Kyoko, Yachiyo, and Moko, they all kind of do the same, where they don't actually do that much before a break happens, neither does Homura, but when the break happens, they're just trying to kill the boss immediately. So yeah, 3 attackers down here, and I'm going to put them in tier 2, that can do maybe at most somewhere between 1 to 2 specials and like 2 turns maybe to kill the boss, and they might do a really good amount of damage during that time. But here's the thing, Homura just gets way more turns and way more specials during that time, as well as follow-up attacks, while her actual on-hit damage is not that much worse than the other people. So she just out-damages all of them quite handily, because she's so far above the damage that all the other 3 attackers in here do. That's why I put her a tier above. And then there's Oriko down there, who is kind of not that great at single target, and she would have maybe been over here if Marukami wasn't there. But the thing is, when it comes to light type attackers, why would you use her if you have Marukami? Like, that's kind of the problem, right? If there's another attacker that's of the same element but better, then why would you use it? Like, you could almost put Momoko down here because Kyoko exists, but I don't think there's that much difference between these two characters. So it's not like the difference is a lot more dramatic between Marukami and Oriko, so that's why Oriko is down there. Okay, moving on. Defenders. Yeah, defenders can be pretty good. You kind of need a defender in the team somewhere, but out of the 3, Kirika is easily the best one of them, because Kirika gives you a lot of defensive capabilities. So if we're talking about no ascensions, just ascension 0, Kirika gives you the best capabilities to keep the party alive. While at the same time, the MP generation buff is kind of insane in a lot of situations. Like, having passive MP regeneration buff on the entire team is pretty darn good, and the other 2 just can't do anything that is as good as that. Sure, Sayaka buffs a little bit of your damage with the resistance shred and her buff from her special, and then Sana gives you more crit rate, and these are all good things, but none of them are as essential as the MP generation buff that Kirika provides, while at the same time also having the best defensives, so she's just great. And if we're talking about PvP, in PvP, you kind of need a Kirika, because yeah, the MP generation buff helps you in a lot of situations get to a special 1 turn earlier than you otherwise would have, and getting to a special 1 turn earlier will in most cases just immediately give you a win on the spot if you have a good team. So getting a win on the spot an entire turn earlier, that's top tier in PvP, easily, no questions asked. Then we come to the support. So we have this, we have that, we have BAM, we have maybe here, and then we have maybe here. If we're talking PvP, by the way, PvP, absolutely Felicia is up here because her AoE stun allows you to kill entire teams when it comes out. So you don't need an attacker, because if you have Felicia, you don't need an attacker at all, and she at the same time will provide stuns even before break, which attackers don't do anything before break. So by putting a stun out there, you can just randomly kill enemies, or not kill enemies, but disrupt enemies from doing what they want to do. And by disrupting enemies, they might just lose if otherwise they would have been on the road to victory, and that is really good. But if we're talking about PvP and PvE combined, she gets bumped down a little. In PvE, she can be kind of interesting because if you hit a random lucky stun could save you a lot of times in PvE, especially on a boss like Birdcage, for example, where the boss has a really big singular strong attack, and if you stun for that single attack, well, there's your victory right there. Other than that, the defense reduction is just really gosh darn good. And that said, the defense reduction of Ren is a lot better, and generally the amount of damage amplification that Ren gives you overall is much better than Felicia, but Felicia has that X factor with the random stun in there. That said, in PvP you don't want to use Ren because Ren just keeps giving the enemy MP with every single one of her attacks and follow-up attacks, and you don't want to give enemies MP if you can help it in PvP, because in PvP it's just a race to who gets their big Pluvia special first, and whoever gets Pluvia special first wins. So you don't want to give enemies MP. That's also why you would never use Oriko in PvP if you want to aim for #1 spot. And Tsuruno is really good for buffing damage, but she doesn't do anything else. So all the other characters also buff damage, but they also do some other cool stuff. That said, you could argue that, oh, Moemura doesn't actually buff damage at all. She only does cool stuff, but her cool stuff is like so good that she can still hang out all the way up here. Mummy, if Mummy is A2, so Ascension 2, she actually gets way further up this tier list, even though this tier list isn't really, like, I didn't put these like in order based on who I think is better, like Kaede is better than Felicia or whatever. But if I was doing that and Mummy was Ascension A2, she would go really far to the front, maybe even all the way to the front, because she's kind of busted at A2. But yeah, these are the general tiers, and it seems kind of interesting that the attackers seem to be kind of low. And some characters that are good in both PvE and PvP are also at the top, of course. Moemura and Mummy, they're both really good at PvE and PvP, because like I said, PvP is just a race to who gets special first, and if you have more speed and more turns, you can get to special much faster, and that is really good. And the same thing goes for PvE. If you get more turns than the boss can get turns, that's just really darn good, and you're able to win before the boss can take many turns. Awesome. Mummy also buffs damage really high, and by using the buffs that Mummy provides, you can actually kill bosses without needing an attacker, because her buffs are just that good, especially if you have a Ren on the team, because Ren also buffs your team's damage extremely high. I think at Ascension 0 she provides about 90% damage amplification to the team if you do the maths, and at A5 I think it's like 150% damage amplification for the team through all her debuffs, so that's kind of busted. So that's actually like extremely busted what Ren provides you. So yeah, breakers are also extremely important, of course. You gotta break stuff in PvP, of course. Like I said, race to special, and that special needs to be a Pluvia special, or like generally a breaker special, and then you can just kill the team off of that. Awesome. And in PvE, if the faster you kill the boss, the faster you break the boss, the faster you kill the boss, the faster you win. Awesome, great, amazing. So this is what the tier list would look like generally, right? But is that really the truth? Is that really what's happening right here? Because you see, we also have some 4-star characters down here. Now this template doesn't have it, but there's also some 3-star characters in the game. Maybe some of these would do really well, like maybe Hazuki is all the way up there. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you something that might turn everything that I've just said on its head. Here comes the Rug Pull. The Rug Pull is going to be the entire second half of this video. Here's the team that I used to do Mirror Layer 35. This is a 71,000 power Artist Witch, which some people have said is one of the more difficult parts of Nightmare. And I think this one's harder than the Nightmare Artist Witch. So it's like a Nightmare plus Artist Witch, maybe even Chaos Artist Witch that we see right here. And I'm gonna put it on the screen right here somewhere. I don't actually know where I'm gonna put it, but somewhere on the screen I'm gonna put a run of me doing this boss. I'm going to probably speed it up really quickly so it actually finishes by the time the video is done. We're going to do this entire boss with this team. So there is a Homura right here who is A5. Now, am I a whale? A tiny bit, but I actually didn't roll much on her banner at all. She just keeps spooking me on all the other banners. Like almost every single banner I rolled on, she kind of spooked me like once or twice. It's like she just She just keeps spooking me. I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe she really loves me or something. But the rest is just low rarity characters. Look at that. You have a 4-star Hazuki, 4-star Ayame. You have the freebie looks Madoka, who some people say is one of the worst characters in the game. Look at where I put her on the tier list. She's in bottom tier. What is this? How is this possible? And then there's Reira on here, who some people have also put really low on the tier list, because why would you use Reira if you have Yuma? Because Yuma is just a better healer, since she can also cleanse ailments, and cleansing ailments is really important. And I still used her here, and it works, and it does this. And here's where it gets more interesting. Yuma is higher on the tier list for a lot of people, but if I used Yuma on this team, I couldn't beat the boss. You can't beat this boss with Yuma on this team. Maybe on your team, but on this team, if I were to put out Reira and take my Yuma in, wouldn't work. Just wouldn't work. Can't do it. Nope. So, okay, what's going on here? That's kind of weird. There's also another piece of content we can look at. Especially, by the way, I also just showed it with my Homuda. I said that maybe attackers aren't that important, and that's maybe why they're a bit lower on the tier list, but that entire team is carried by Homuda. So is everything that I just said wrong because I just carried the team with Homuda? So that can't be right. But if you watched my other video with Madokami, in my Madokami video, I showed you 2 kills out of many that I did where I did bosses without an attacker. I did bosses without an attacker on Nightmare. The hardest bosses in the game, Needle Witch, AI, I did without using an attacker. So on one hand, I had an attacker carry my team in one of the hardest pieces of content in the game, and had only low rarity characters beside that. And on the other side, I had teams that didn't use an attacker at all, that also very easily beat the hardest content in the game. So that's kind of weird. Something weird is going on here. Could there be something going on with the meta? I might even put the word meta in the title. I actually decided what the title is going to be. Awesome. But here's the weird part about the meta of this game, and where we really need to get into the weeds. Look at this. This is score attack. Score attack goes up to all the way 15. I want to show it off on 14 or whatever, because there's some cool stuff I want to show off on score attack 14. I did this. I did for score attack 14. Awesome. And I want to show you what happens on this score attack. And here's the team that I use for this. Not this one. No, it actually is this one. Okay, here's the team that I want to use for this, okay? We have a Madokami, we have a Kaede, we have a 4-star Ayame. That's the important part. We have a Moimura, and we have a Sana. So here's the thing about this boss. This boss gives itself a barrier, and it also gives itself a stacking attack buff. So since that is really hard to deal with, because the boss gains various bonuses also if it's barriered, I think, you kind of want to use a buff remover, right? So use a buff remover, and this is why Ayame is in here. So if you look at the tier list, she's not even on the tier list because I didn't rank the 4 stars, but does that mean we really want to use Ayame? Let's just say, oh, Ayame, since she is so important for score attack 14, we're going to put her all the way up there on S rank. Okay, awesome. Since we have to use Ayame here, we're going to have to put her on S rank. We're also using a bunch of other characters that are really highly rated, so certainly this is going to be very easy, right? We're going to have a Sana, I think she's like A1 or A2 or something. Let me check. She's A2. This is an A2 Sana. Oh my god, she's good. She may even be A3, I didn't actually check. But yeah, this barrier is really powerful. Man, this barrier is so good. I'm taking like no damage. Oh my god, my Ayame is dead. How is this possible? What? Are you seeing this? Okay, here's the rug pull. Elements are like really fucking important in later parts of the game, especially when you're doing like extremely high end game stuff. I'm gonna do a video where I talk about all of the interesting bits and pieces that the game doesn't tell you, like hidden information, or at least information that most people don't know. Here's the thing about elements. The boss is weak to a bunch of elements, and of course we all know, oh, you can do more break damage to the boss by hitting weak element and stuff. But here's another really important thing. Not just also that you do more damage if you hit a weak element versus not hitting weak element. Okay, that's also important. But the most important part is the boss also does less damage to you if you are of the advantage element. So, for example, look at the elements of my characters. I have a light type right here. Oh, light type, the boss is weak to light type. Madokami took a lot less damage. Awesome. I have a forest type right here, Kaede. Oh, weak to forest. Kaede took a lot less damage. And then we have a void, another forest. Oh, they're also weak to void and forest. Yeah, those two people didn't take a lot of damage. Ayame. Yeah, the boss is not weak to fire. So Ayame got absolutely destroyed. I think she's taking like 80% more damage on this boss. And this 80% that I just threw out there, that depends on the boss. Most of the time in just Nightmare, like if you're doing regular Nightmare or you're doing regular Battler or even standard, if you're doing just standard bosses do 25% more damage to characters that aren't of the advantage element. 25% in almost every single case. And then when you get to late game stuff, like this right here, it turns out it can get even more than 25%. Even 80% in this case. But it depends on the boss. Other bosses don't have this. I think the boss after this, which is Walpurgisnacht, actually doesn't have this. It's only 25% and not 80%. So it also depends on the boss. Okay, but even if it wasn't 80%, still, that's a lot of damage. That's an absolutely insane amount of bonus damage, even if it was just 25%. And we're gonna have to do something about that, right? So what do we do if we can't use Ayame? And here's the interesting part. Well, if we need buff removal, do we have someone else who can remove buffs? Well, there's no 5-star that can do it. There's no 4-star that can do it. It needs to be someone who has one of the weak elements. Could there be someone who is of the enemy's weak element who actually can remove buffs? And this is why people use 3-star Hasuki on this boss. I live streamed myself going through the tower, and I killed this using 3-star Hasuki. Because 3-star Hasuki is of an element that the boss is weak to. In this case, it is a light type. So she's light type, so she actually doesn't take that much damage from the boss. And this is defense sound and buff removal. So this removes the enemy's barrier and the enemy's attack buff that it gains later. So by using this, now we can check what happens after the very first turn. And we can see that, oh, anyway, that's a lot better. Oh my god, we didn't actually take much damage. Huh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? But now gets the other part of the equation that I sort of glossed over a little bit earlier. Of course, when it comes to dealing damage, you want to use an attacker that is of the correct element. Because if you're attacking a high-end enemy that says that they have resistance right here. So look, this boss has 3 weaknesses, and it also has resistances against every element that it isn't weak to. So since it's weak to these 3 elements, that means it's resistant to the other 3 elements that it isn't weak to. Awesome. What does resistance actually mean? It means, in this case, I think it is 35% defense, 30% less damage. So it's 30% less damage taken from Dark in most cases. Usually in Nightmare, it's 30%. In Battle, I think it's also 30%. But, and I haven't tested this exactly here, but I think actually, for this boss might actually be more than 30%. It might actually be like 80% or something. Like something insane. Because once again, just like how much bonus damage the boss deals to you sort of fluctuates if you get to really high-end stuff, the amount of damage that you deal also fluctuates on high-end stuff, unless you're hitting weakness. So on a boss like this, you kind of really need to use a light-type damage dealer or any of the other 2 elements if you have, to actually deal good damage to this boss, because no one else will actually be able to do any good damage, right? So you gotta be able to do good damage, so therefore you also need an attacker of the correct element. So what does that mean then? What does that actually mean for us? So if we talked about endgame Nightmare, I just mentioned that you don't need an attacker for endgame Nightmare, so that means attackers are low on the tier list, right? But then I mentioned that for other parts of the content, you kind of need the correct elements, so it depends on what element is currently correct. So, that's kind of weird. But then again, if you have teams that can beat like Late Nightmare without an attacker, then of course they could beat it with an attacker, so it's not like you can't use an attacker in those kinds of teams, right? It's more like, oh, you could do it, but you don't have to. But since you need a light type attacker for the score attack, then surely Murder has to be up here, and like everyone else is down here, right? Everyone else is down here, also all down there. So yeah, that means that this is like, for this score attack, it looks like this, right? This score attack looks like this, because then, I mean, Oriko is still down here, even though she's light type, because it's Oriko. But yeah, that's kind of weird, that on this score attack it looks like this. What about that tower thing that I showed you? On that tower, I was able to use low rarity characters that were of the correct element because they were being carried by an attacker that is of the boss's weak element, that is just really good. So actually for that boss, the tier list would look more something like that. That's kind of weird. But if we wanted to sort of average it out across all different types of content, can we do that? Well, in a way we actually can, because there's a secret hidden tier that is actually above here. And this tier actually says, what does it say? What should we call this tier? Great when used not on advantage element on high-end content. And here's what I'm gonna, so this is basically the tier for characters that even if they're off the wrong element in high tier content can still be used to great effect. Yeah, I'm complete. The tier is actually already full. I don't actually need to actually put anything there because that's the way it is. So the tier is actually empty. Apart from, and this is the interesting part, A4 attackers. If you have defenders, if you have a defender at Ascension 4, they can actually sort of still survive even if they take like 80% bonus damage or something like that. And that's kind of the only thing that you could potentially still use if you're off element. So that kind of means, well, what does that mean? We kind of need to just reshape the tier lists a little, because now the tier list actually morphs a little. Because we can say, for example, hey, okay, let's just say about light element. Let's say we need to use light element characters. So if we want to use light element characters, who are we using? Well, we're using these two, right? These two are a light element, these two are a light element. We're not really using these. So you can say, okay, so on light element weak use, and then we can say light element weak maybe not use, okay? So this is a new tier that we're gonna make, and we're gonna put these two in here, because if an enemy is weak to light, we're probably gonna use any of these three. But if enemy is not weak to light, we probably don't want to use these two, or rather, if an enemy is weak to light, we probably still don't want to use these two, because these two are just bad. These two are so bad. Even if an enemy is weak to light, we probably don't want to use them. And if an enemy is weak to light, we definitely want to use these three up here if we can. Like at least one breaker. So if you already have Pluvia, you're not going to use Iroha because that's 2 breakers unless you want to use a double breaker strat. But theoretically, you just do that for every single element, right? This is the actual tier list. This is going to be a whole bunch of rows down here. I'm going to make a whole bunch more where you just say, okay, we're going to just go down here for every single element. I'm not counting right now. I hope I have enough for all of them. I don't know. So you go down here and you say, okay, so what if an element is weak to dark? Or what if an element is weak to, let me check. So we have dark, we have light, we have fire. Okay. We have fire. Then we have aqua. And this is the real tier list. You wanna know the actual tier list? This is the actual tier list, where you just go down the element list and you just say, hey, if an enemy is weak to this element, use this character. And that's literally it. We're almost done. I'm getting really flustered here. Forest, and then we also have forest down here. Okay, so if an enemy is weak to light, we use this. If an enemy is weak to dark, we definitely use this. We definitely want to use this as well. So these are the characters that you want to use. So which character who is dark type do you not want to use if an enemy is dark weak? None of these come to mind actually. What if an enemy is weak to fire? Who are you going to use? Probably going to use these two. Definitely this. I don't know if I want to use any of these. Okay, what else do we have? Enemy is weak to forest. Definitely use that. If an enemy is weak to... Oh, I forgot void. You know why I forgot void? Because, you know, it's void. I guess it just makes sense thematically. So if an enemy is weak to void, we definitely use this. And weak to aqua, we definitely... Oh my god, I actually put that in aqua. No, there we go. And then forest. So it turns out, this is the actual tier list. Do we get all 5 stars? I think we got all the 5 stars. So, you can use the defenders even if they're off element, if they are Ascension 4. Let's say they're not Ascension 4. If they're not Ascension 4, then you use them when they're off the correct element. So this you use for aqua, this you use for forest, and this you use for dark type. Awesome. If an enemy is weak to light, you have these 5 light type characters, and of these 5, you probably want to use these top 3. You probably don't want to use these bottom 3. You could use Oracle if you wanted to, but you probably don't want to do it if you have a Madokami. If you don't have Madokami, okay, let's say you don't have Madokami, because everyone has Lux at least, but even then you might not want to use her if you have any of these 2. But I guess if you don't have any of these other 2, then I guess maybe you just use the 5 stars if they're of the correct element. And actually maybe that's just it. Huh. That's kind of weird. I guess that's the end of the video. You just use them with the of the correct element, and I guess it kind of is like that for the other characters as well, because even if it's a card who's not actually that great, if the enemy is weak, let's say for example you don't have a good character of the, like, let's say you don't have a good attacker of Aqua element, then if the enemy is Aqua weak, you might have to use like Asuka, and the same goes for all these other characters. Haha, just kidding. Yeah, you put that here, and then what else do we have? Like the enemy was fire weak, right? And we used Reda instead of Yuma, so actually that's what we did. And that's another Aqua character right here. That's another Forest character. Yeah, the tier list looks kind of weird now that we actually figured out what the actual end game of this game is. Huh. Yeah, you don't want to use Hana though, because Hana still sucks. Like, you really don't ever want to use Hana no matter what happens. I'm sorry, Hana, but it is the truth. I'm sorry, it actually is the truth. Maybe she might actually be the only character who ends up like that. And I'm really sorry for the Hana stans out there, but I think she really is the only character that actually ends up in that tier. Oh my god, that is just sad. Oh my god. Yeah, because you could even use Kush, and there we go. Use every character in the game if the enemy is weak to that element, except Hana. Don't use Hana. Just don't do it. Unless Alina gets released. Because if Alina got released, I guess if Alina got released, then you would actually use her together with Alina if she was there. So, yeah, that's the matter of the game. That's the matter of the game. Welcome to my TED Talk. I just explained to you the matter of etc. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next time.